I found my sister and her in-laws living in my cabin. She said, "Get out, Parasite. I'll call the police." I replied, "Do it." Then I watched her face turn pale as I showed the cops the deed. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. What is a parasite like you doing here? Get out right now or I am calling the police. In the living room, where the firelight flickered softly against the stone hearth, my biological sister, Tiffany, spat those words at me. In her manicured hand was the luxury brand crystal glass I had given her as a Christmas present 3 years ago. Inside it swirled a vintage red wine that had been aging for years in my mountain lodge's climate-controlled cellar, a bottle worth several $1,000s. Her lips glistened sensually, stained with that expensive liquid, but her eyes were cold, filled with a mixture of arrogance and annoyance that I had seen 1,000 times before. But this time, it was different. This time, we weren't in her apartment that I paid for. We weren't at a dinner I was buying. We were standing in the one place on earth that was supposed to be mine and mine alone. My name is Kendra, and I am 38 years old. I built my real estate business from the ground up, clawing my way through a male-dominated industry until I succeeded. I am now living a life free from financial hardship, but the cost has been high. I have sacrificed relationships, sleep, and my own mental health to build an empire. At work, I have always prided myself on making calm, realistic decisions. This place, this secluded lodge nestled high in the Colorado Rockies, is my sanctuary. It is a haven I poured my heart, soul, and savings into creating. And today is Christmas Eve, the one day of the year I cherish the most. The drive up here had been brutal. The weather forecast had warned of a historic blizzard, a bomb cyclone that was burying the state under feet of snow. Most people were hunkering down, but I had packed my Range Rover and driven straight into the teeth of the storm. I had just gone through a painful breakup with a man named David, who finally got tired of coming second to my family drama. I was exhausted, heartbroken, and desperate for silence. I planned to do nothing more than curl up under a weighted blanket by the fire, sip hot cocoa, and let the peace of the mountains wash over me. My idea of pure luxury was isolation. But as I drove up the winding private road leading to my mountain lodge, fighting against whiteout conditions that made the towering pines look like ghosts, a familiar car caught my eye. Parked in the guest space, already dusted with 2 inches of fresh powder, was a white luxury SUV. My stomach dropped like a stone. It was the very SUV I had put the down payment on and was still paying the monthly installments for. It was Tiffany's car. Next to it sat another vehicle, a snow-covered, older model sedan that had seen better days, which I recognized as belonging to Brad's parents. An uneasy chill stirred in my chest, colder than the wind howling outside. I had told no one about this trip. Absolutely no one. Sure, I had given Tiffany the code to the emergency key box beside the front door, but I had been explicitly clear, it was for life-or-death emergencies only. Never, in my worst imagination, did I think she would barge in uninvited with her husband's entire family to throw a party in my home. Slowly, I stepped out of my car. The wind bit at my exposed face, freezing the tears of frustration forming in my eyes. The snow crunched loudly under my heavy boots as I walked up the stone steps. I placed my hand on the heavy oak door at the entrance. It wasn't locked. In fact, it was slightly ajar, leaking my expensive heating out into the storm. The moment I pushed it open, it wasn't just the warm air from the fireplace that brushed against my face. Loud music, bursts of raucous laughter, and the heat of several bodies tangled in revelry hit me all at once. The smell was distinct: roast turkey, sage stuffing, and stale alcohol. In the living room were Tiffany, her husband Brad, and unmistakably his parents, Linda and Robert, along with his siblings. 7 people in total lounged about as if this were their ancestral estate. The coffee table was a mess of turkey bones, greasy napkins, and empty champagne bottles. Only their ridiculous matching Christmas sweaters reminded me what night it was supposed to be. Their heavy winter coats lay tossed over my pristine beige sofa. But what truly froze me in place, what made my breath hitch in my throat, was the sight near the fireplace. Linda, Brad's mother, was wearing it. She was draped in a vintage mink coat. It wasn't just any coat. It was my mother's coat. The one thing I had kept wrapped in preservation paper in the back of the locked cedar closet in the master bedroom. The one thing that still smelled like her perfume 10 years after she passed away. Linda was wearing it casually, using the sleeve to wipe wine off her mouth as she laughed at something Brad said. I felt a physical blow to my chest. The disrespect was visceral. It felt like someone had slapped me. They had gone into my private room, unlocked my private closet, and were treating my most sacred heirloom like a costume. Even when I stepped fully inside, stomping the snow off my boots, they didn't notice me at first. Then Brad, slouched arrogantly on the armchair, pointed in my direction, his eyes widening in what looked like panic. The music came to an abrupt stop. Linda stood up, swaying slightly. "Oh, you must be Kendra. You have returned much earlier than Tiffany said you would. How was your trip to Europe?" At her words, I frowned, confusion warring with my rage. Trip to Europe? I hadn't been to Europe in 5 years. At that moment, Tiffany emerged from the kitchen holding that crystal wine glass. When she saw me, her face didn't show fear. It didn't show guilt. It twisted with irritation. She looked at me like I was the intruder. Like I was the dirt on the bottom of her shoe. And then, with the smell of my expensive wine clinging to her breath, she hurled those opening words at me. "What is a parasite like you doing here? Get out right now or I am calling the police." The word parasite hung in the air, echoing off the high-vaulted ceilings of my lodge. It was so absurd, so completely detached from reality, that for a split second, I almost laughed. But the sight of my mother's wine-stained fur coat on Linda's shoulders strangled any humor I might have felt. The audacity was breathtaking. I walked further into the room, my boots making heavy, deliberate thuds on the hardwood floor. I reached over and ripped the power cord of the expensive stereo system out of the wall, plunging the room into an awkward, heavy silence. "I do not recall lending this house to anyone," I said quietly, my voice trembling not with fear, but with the effort to keep from screaming. "And I certainly did not go on any trip to Europe. This is my house. I bought the land. I hired the architects. I paid for every single beam and brick." Brad shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between me and his wife. He looked pale, like a man who knew he was standing on a trapdoor. But he said nothing. He just sat there, spineless as ever, clutching a glass of my scotch. Tiffany, however, doubled down. She marched up to me, invading my personal space. The scent of alcohol on her was overpowering. "Don't listen to her," she shouted to her in-laws, waving her hand dismissively. "She is delusional. She's been jealous of my happiness for years. She's just a lonely, bitter spinster who stalks me because she has no life of her own." Linda, emboldened by Tiffany's confidence and perhaps the alcohol, scoffed. "So this is the difficult sister you told us about? The one who tries to control your life? The one who borrows money from you and never pays it back?" My jaw dropped. Borrows money? From Tiffany? I looked at Linda, a woman I had met only a handful of times, usually when I was writing a check for something her son needed. "You are wearing my dead mother's coat," I said, my voice dropping to an icy whisper. "Take it off. Now." Linda clutched the collar of the coat, looking offended. "Excuse me? This is a gift from Tiffany. She said it was an old rag found in the attic that she was going to donate anyway." An old rag. Donate. My vision blurred red. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I looked around the room, really looked, and that's when I saw the extent of their occupation. They hadn't just crashed for a night. There were suitcases everywhere. They had moved furniture around. There were nail holes in the wall where they had hung cheap plastic Christmas decorations. And then I saw the mantel. The frame above the fireplace. The photo of my parents, smiling on their wedding day, a photo I greeted every time I entered this home, was gone. In its place was a gaudy, oversized portrait of Brad's entire family, smiling widely in a studio setting. "Where is the picture?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Where is the photo of Mom and Dad?" Brad's sister, a young woman who was currently eating a cookie on my armrest, pointed toward the corner without looking up from her phone. I looked. There, shoved carelessly into a wastebasket, face down among wrapping paper and discarded turkey skin, was the silver frame. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, terrifying sound of a bridge collapsing. The bridge that connected me to my family obligation. I walked over, retrieved the photo, and wiped a smear of grease off the glass with my sleeve. I turned back to them, my face devoid of any emotion. "Get out," I said. "All of you. Get out of my house immediately." Tiffany laughed. It was a shrill, manic sound that grated on my nerves. "You can't be serious. Look outside, Kendra. It's a blizzard. You want to kill us? You want to kill Brad's parents? You are sick. This is our Christmas, and you are trespassing on our celebration." She turned to her husband. "Brad, tell her. Tell her to leave. Tell her this is our property now." Brad looked at me, then at the floor. "Kendra, look, we told my parents that we bought this place. Just for the holiday, you know? To impress them. Can't we just discuss this in the morning? Don't embarrass us." My eyes widened. "You told them you bought it? You stole my home to play pretend millionaire?" I turned to Linda. "Your son and daughter-in-law are lying to you. They don't own this house. They don't own the car outside. They don't even pay rent on the apartment they live in. I pay for everything. And tonight, the bank is closed." Tiffany slammed her wine glass down on the table, hard enough that the stem cracked. "Fine. If you want to play the villain, go ahead. I'm calling the cops. I'll tell them a stalker has broken in and is threatening us. Let's see who they believe, a happy family celebrating Christmas, or a crazy woman ranting about a coat and claiming she owns everything." She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. "Do it," I challenged her, locking eyes with my sister. "Call them. I want you to call them. Because I am done protecting you." Tiffany smirked, holding the phone to her ear. "Hello? 911? Yes, I need help immediately. There is a woman in my house. She's violent. She's refusing to leave. She's threatening my elderly in-laws. Please, send someone before she hurts us." I stood there, clutching my parents' photo, and watched her. She thought she was calling my bluff. She thought the weather, the holiday, and her manipulation would save her. She thought I was the same Kendra who had cleaned up her messes for decades. She thought I would crumble to save face for the family. She was wrong. She had just lit the fuse on her own destruction. While Tiffany shouted dramatically into her phone, giving the dispatcher a performance worthy of an Academy Award, describing me as a deranged intruder, I stood motionless. The adrenaline was coursing through my veins, making my fingertips tingle, but my mind drifted back. It went back to the moment this trap was set. It started 10 years ago, in a sterile hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and dying flowers. My mother was fading fast. Pancreatic cancer is a cruel thief. It had stolen her vitality, her laughter, and finally, her future. I was 28 then, standing on the precipice of my own life. I had just received a full scholarship for a PhD program in economics at a prestigious university on the East Coast. It was my dream. I had worked my entire youth for it. Tiffany was 22, freshly graduated from college with a degree in art history that she had barely managed to finish because she spent more time partying than studying. She was the baby, the golden child, the one with the sparkling eyes and the helpless pout that made everyone want to save her. "Kendra," my mother whispered, her grip on my hand surprisingly strong for someone so frail. Her eyes were cloudy, focused on something I couldn't see. "Promise me." "Anything, Mom," I choked out, tears streaming down my face. "Tiffany, she's not like you. She's fragile. She's a dreamer. The world will eat her alive if she's alone. She needs guidance. She needs protection. Please, promise me you'll look after her. Don't let her go astray. Be her anchor." I looked at Tiffany, who was sobbing in the corner, looking indeed like a broken doll. I didn't see the calculation in her eyes then. I only saw my little sister. I felt a heavy weight settle onto my shoulders, a weight that would eventually crush my own dreams. "I promise," I whispered. That promise became my prison. After Mom and Dad died within 2 years of each other, I declined the PhD offer. I stayed in Colorado to take over the small, struggling family real estate portfolio and expand it. I worked 18-hour days. I renovated dumpy apartments myself to save money, breathing in drywall dust and chemical fumes. I dealt with contractors who tried to cheat me, tenants who trashed my units, and banks that didn't want to lend to a young woman. I fought tooth and nail to build an empire. Tiffany, meanwhile, took her half of the small life insurance payout and went to Europe to find herself. She spent 2 years posting photos of vineyards in Tuscany and beaches in Greece while I was covered in pain and stress. When she returned, broke and emotionally exhausted, I took her in. I paid for her apartment. I bought her groceries. I listened to her cry about how the world didn't understand her artistic vision. I remember the day she met Brad. I had just closed a massive deal on a commercial complex, the deal that finally made me wealthy. I was exhausted but proud. I wanted to celebrate. Tiffany brought Brad to dinner. "He's a visionary, Kendra," she had gushed. "He's going to launch a tech startup." Brad was charming, in a slippery sort of way. He ordered the most expensive steak on the menu and let me pick up the check without even a fake reach for his wallet. That should have been the first red flag. Over the next 5 years, the pattern solidified. Tiffany and Brad would have a crisis, a car breaking down, a rent hike, a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity, and I would open my checkbook. I told myself it was for Mom. I told myself that family supports family. I told myself that one day, they would stand on their own feet. I even sacrificed my own love life. 2 years ago, I was engaged to a wonderful man named David. He was kind, successful, and he saw right through Tiffany. "She's bleeding you dry, Kendra," David had told me one night after Tiffany interrupted our anniversary dinner with a hysterically fake emergency about a leaky faucet. "She doesn't respect you. She uses you. If we get married, I can't live with a third person in our marriage. I can't be married to you and your sister." I defended her. I told him he didn't understand the bond of sisters. I told him about the promise to my mother. David looked at me with sad eyes. "Your mother asked you to support her, Kendra. Not to disable her. You're not helping her, you're crippling her. And you're destroying us." David left. He couldn't watch me be a doormat. I cried for months. I almost chased after him. But Tiffany was there, handing me tissues and whispering, he was selfish. He wanted to separate us. Family is forever. I believed her. I chose family. And this was my reward. Standing in my own living room, watching the sister I sacrificed my career, my youth, and my fiancé for, as she told the police I was a criminal. I looked at Tiffany's face as she spoke to the operator. It wasn't the face of the fragile girl Mom had worried about. It was the face of a predator who had grown fat and comfortable on the meat of my labor. The fragile dreamer was gone. In her place was a parasite who had finally decided to consume the host entirely. The realization hit me harder than the cold outside. It wasn't just about money. It was about love. I had bought her love, and the moment the transaction was threatened, the love evaporated. I hadn't been protecting her. I had been enabling a monster. And tonight, the enabling ended. Blue and red lights flashed against the snow-frosted windows, creating a disco effect in the tense living room. The silence that had fallen after Tiffany's call was broken by the heavy thud of boots on the porch. Tiffany rushed to the door before I could move. She threw it open and practically collapsed into the arms of the first officer, a tall man with a stern face and snow on his shoulders. "Oh, thank God you're here," she wailed, squeezing out genuine tears. "I thought she was going to hurt us." Two officers stepped inside, shaking off the cold. They looked around the room, taking in the chaotic scene, the spilled wine, the terrified in-laws, and me, standing calm and stone-faced by the fireplace, still clutching the photo of my parents. "What seems to be the problem here, ma'am?" the officer asked Tiffany, gently guiding her back into the room. "It's her." Tiffany pointed a shaking finger at me. "That woman. She's obsessed with me. She's been stalking my family. We came here for a quiet Christmas vacation at our family lodge, and she just barged in. She broke the lock. She started screaming and throwing things." The officer turned his gaze to me. His hand rested instinctively near his belt. "Ma'am, is this true? Do you know these people?" "She is my sister," I said, my voice steady and low. "And this is my house. They are trespassing." Tiffany let out a gasp of outrage. "Liar! She's lying. My husband and I own this place. We built it. She's just a jealous, bitter relative who wasn't invited." The second officer, a younger woman, looked between us. She seemed confused. "It was a classic," she said, and Tiffany was putting on the performance of a lifetime. Brad nodded vigorously from the couch, finally finding his courage now that the police were there to protect him. "Yes, officer," Brad chimed in. "It's our property. We have the keys." She forced her way in. "Please, just remove her so we can feel safe." The tall officer stepped toward me. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification. If you can't prove you live here, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. We can sort out the civil dispute later, but right now, you're the agitation." I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I simply walked over to the entryway where I had dropped my leather briefcase. It was the briefcase I took to every closing, every business meeting. It contained my life. I picked it up and placed it on the dining table, clearing away a plate of half-eaten turkey to make room. I spun the combination dials. Click. Click. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I lifted the lid. Inside, organized in neat, color-coded folders, was everything. I pulled out a thick blue folder. "Officer," I said, beckoning him over. "Please look at this." I handed him the deed to the property. It was the original, stamped and notarized, bearing only one name, Kendra Brooks. I handed him my Colorado driver's license, which listed my primary address, but then I handed him the utility bills for this address, electric, gas, internet, all in my name, dated from last month back to 5 years ago when the foundation was poured. I pulled out the property tax receipts for the last 3 years. I pulled out the insurance policy for the structure and contents. The officer took the documents. He shone his flashlight on them, examining the seals, the dates, the names. He looked at my ID, then back at the deed. He flipped through the pages slowly. Tiffany's crying stopped abruptly. She watched the officer's face, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine terror appeared in her eyes. She knew what a deed looked like. She knew she didn't have one. Brad tried to intervene. "Officer, she forged those. She works in real estate, she knows how to fake papers." The officer ignored him. He looked up at me and handed the documents back with a respectful nod. Then, he turned slowly to face Tiffany and Brad. His demeanor changed instantly. The sympathy was gone, replaced by the hard edge of authority. "Ma'am," he said to Tiffany, "these documents are legitimate. I've seen enough deeds to know a real one. This property belongs to Ms. Kendra Brooks. Exclusively." Tiffany stammered. "Well, I mean, we're family. It's family property. She bought it with family money." "That's a civil matter for a courtroom," the officer cut her off. "But as far as the law is concerned right now, you are guests who have been asked to leave by the owner. And since the owner is standing here telling me you broke in." He looked at the keypad on the door. "Did you have a code, or did you force entry?" "She stole the code," I interjected. "I gave it to her for emergencies only." "This is not an emergency. This is a burglary. And officer, look at the coat that woman is wearing." I pointed at Linda. "That is my deceased mother's coat. It was taken from a locked closet in the master bedroom. That is theft." The room went dead silent. Even the air seemed to freeze. Linda looked down at the coat, her hands trembling. "That means," the officer continued, looking at Brad and his parents, "that you are all trespassing. Ms. Brooks has the right to demand you leave immediately. Or, if she chooses, we can start putting people in handcuffs right now for breaking and entering and theft." "But it's Christmas," Linda shrieked, clutching my mother's coat tighter. "You can't kick us out on Christmas. We have nowhere to go." I stepped forward, looking Linda dead in the eye. "Actually, I can. And if you don't take off my mother's coat in the next 10 seconds, I will add theft to the list of charges I press tonight. I am not playing games anymore." The reality of the situation crashed down on them like an avalanche. The officer's words hung heavy in the air: trespassing, theft, handcuffs. Linda scrambled to take off the fur coat, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't work the buttons. She practically threw it onto the sofa as if it were burning her skin. I picked it up gently, inspecting the wine stain, my heart hardening with every second. "Ms. Brooks," the officer said to me, his voice lowered. "Look, it's coming down hard out there. The roads are getting slick. Are you sure you want to do this tonight? We can escort them out, but it's going to be rough driving." I looked out the window. The snow was blowing sideways, a wall of white. Then I looked back at Tiffany. She was glaring at me, her eyes full of hatred, not an ounce of remorse. She still felt entitled to my home. She still felt she was the victim. If I let them stay, they win, I thought. If I let them stay, the boundaries I'm trying to build will crumble before they're even set. They will think they can abuse me, call the police on me, and then sleep in my guest beds because family. "I want them out," I told the officer clearly. "They have cars. They can go to a hotel in the town at the base of the mountain. It's a 40-minute drive. If they leave now, they'll make it. I am not running a shelter for people who abuse me." The officer nodded, resigning himself to the paperwork. "All right, folks, you heard the lady. Pack it up. You have 15 minutes to vacate the premises, or you'll be escorted out in handcuffs." Pandemonium erupted. Brad's siblings started shoving clothes into bags. Linda was sobbing hysterically into Robert's shoulder, wailing about how I was a heartless witch and ruining Christmas. I stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, watching them scramble. It was pathetic. They scurried like roaches when the lights turn on. Then came the issue of the cars. One of the officers looked at the group. "Who's driving?" I smell a lot of alcohol in here. Brad froze. He had been drinking whiskey since I walked in. Linda and the siblings had been downing champagne. Tiffany was holding a wine glass when I arrived. I haven't had anything, Robert, Brad's father, spoke up. His voice was quiet, defeated. He was a small man who had spent his life being steamrolled by his wife and son. I'm the designated driver. I haven't had a drop since we got here. The officer walked over to Robert and performed a quick field sobriety test, following a pen with his eyes. Robert passed easily. Okay, sir. You're good to drive, the officer said. Great, Tiffany snapped, grabbing her designer handbag. Let's just go. We'll take the SUV. It's safer in the snow. She reached for the keys to the white luxury SUV on the counter. I stepped in front of her. My hand slammed down on the keys before she could touch them. No, I said. Tiffany recoiled. What is wrong with you? It's snowing. We need the four-wheel drive. The sedan can't handle this. That car is in my name, Tiffany, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. I paid the down payment. I pay the monthly note. I pay the insurance. You are not taking my car. Tiffany's jaw dropped. You gave it to me. I let you use it, I corrected. Just like I let you use the apartment. Just like I let you use my money. But that ends tonight. You called me a parasite, remember? Parasites don't lend their hosts luxury vehicles. Brad stepped forward, trying to look menacing but failing miserably. Kendra, be reasonable. There are 7 of us. We can't all fit in my dad's sedan. It's a Toyota Camry. It's unsafe to pack that many people in a blizzard. You are literally endangering our lives. That sounds like a you problem, Brad, I said coldly. Maybe you should have thought about seating capacity before you invited your entire extended family to invade my home. Call a taxi. Or take 2 trips. I don't care. But those keys stay here. Brad looked at the officer, pleading. Officer, surely you can't let her do this? That's our car. We have kids' stuff in there. The officer looked at me. Who is the registered owner, ma'am? I pulled the registration out of my briefcase. It was right there next to the deed. Kendra Brooks. The officer shrugged at Brad. It's her car, son. She doesn't have to let you take it. And frankly, with the weather like this, I wouldn't lend my car to someone who just called the cops on me either. The color drained from Tiffany's face. She looked at the windows, then at the crowded, beat-up sedan outside, and finally back at me. For the first time, she realized that I wasn't just kicking them out. I was stripping them bare. As she walked past me, dragging her suitcase, she stopped. Her eyes were venomous. I hope you die alone in this big, empty house, she hissed. You are dead to me. I looked at her, feeling a strange sense of calm. Better to be alone in my house than a thief in someone else's, I replied. Just as she reached the door, I saw her hand dart out. She grabbed a small, silver antique clock from the hallway table, a piece my grandmother had brought from Germany. Drop it, I said, not even turning around. The officer stepped forward. Ma'am, put it back. Tiffany let out a scream of frustration and slammed the clock back onto the table, cracking the glass face. She stormed out into the snow. They shuffled out into the cold, heads bowed against the wind. 7 people trying to pile into a 5-seater sedan. Luggage was tied to the roof with twine they found in the garage. It was a clown car of misery. I watched from the window as they argued, shoved, and cried. Robert started the engine. The old sedan sputtered, coughed, and finally roared to life. The taillights faded into the white swirl of the storm, weaving slightly as the tires fought for grip. I was alone. But as I watched them leave, I realized the war wasn't over. They would come back. They would demand. They would guilt trip. Unless I finished it. Unless I burned the bridge so completely that they couldn't even find the river. The heavy oak door clicked shut, locking out the wind and the noise. The silence that followed was absolute. The lodge was quiet, save for the crackling of the fire. But inside my head, a war was still raging. They were gone, but the anger hadn't dissipated. It had crystallized into something colder, sharper. Tiffany's words, "Parasite. Dead to me." Echoed in my mind. She thought this was just a bad night. She thought she would go back to the city, cry to her friends, and wait for me to apologize and turn the money tap back on. That's how it always worked. She assumed that once I calmed down, guilt would set in, and I would be begging for her forgiveness with a new handbag or a check. Not this time. I sat down on the sofa, pushing aside the cushion Linda had sat on. I pulled out my smartphone. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from the sheer magnitude of what I was about to do. This wasn't just revenge. This was an amputation. I opened my banking app. Face ID recognized me instantly. The blue light of the screen illuminated my face in the dim room. First, the credit cards. I navigated to the Authorized Users tab on my primary Platinum Amex card. There it was, Tiffany Hayes. Limit, $10,000 a month. She usually maxed it out on essentials like spa days and designer shoes. I tapped Remove User. A warning popped up, "Are you sure? This card will be deactivated immediately." I didn't hesitate. Confirm. I did the same for the Visa card I gave Brad for business expenses that somehow always ended up being used at golf courses. Confirm. Next, the SUV. I opened the app for the auto finance company. I found the lease management section. I had co-signed for the loan, but I was the primary payer. I clicked on Report Status. I found the option for voluntary repossession or lease termination. I decided to be more proactive. I sent a message through the app's Secure Center. "I am the primary leaseholder. The vehicle is currently in possession of a secondary driver who has been denied permission to use it. I will be arranging for a tow truck to collect it from its current location tomorrow morning to return to the dealership." I then canceled the automatic payment scheduled for tomorrow. Let the bank call them when the account shows past due. Then, the apartment. This was the big one. Tiffany and Brad lived in a penthouse apartment downtown that I owned. It was one of my best properties. I charged them family rent, which was basically the HOA fee, about $500 a month for a place that could easily rent for $4,500. I opened my email and composed a message to my property management company. Subject, Immediate Eviction Notice, Unit 4B to Sarah Jenkins, Property Manager. Sarah, please issue an immediate notice to quit for Tiffany and Brad Hayes in Unit 4B. They are in violation of the lease agreement due to unauthorized subletting. I remembered Tiffany mentioning she let a friend stay there for cash while they were away, and failure to maintain the property standards. Also, I am terminating the family discount effective immediately. Serve them the eviction notice tomorrow morning. No exceptions. Sent. I watched the progress bar swoosh across the screen. It was done. With a few taps of my finger, I had dismantled their entire lifestyle. The car they drove, the roof over their heads, the clothes on their backs, it was all funded by me. And I had just turned off the spigot. I imagined Tiffany's face when she tried to buy breakfast tomorrow at Starbucks and the card declined. I imagined her face when the landlord knocked on the door with a sheriff. A strange sensation washed over me. It was power. For 10 years, I had felt powerless, held hostage by a promise to a dead woman. Now, I was free. I had dropped the nuclear bomb, and the fallout would be spectacular. But I wasn't done. I logged into the family phone plan. Cancel line, Tiffany. Cancel line, Brad. I logged into the streaming services. Change password. Sign out of all devices. It was petty. It was ruthless. And it felt amazing. Tiffany had called me a parasite. But as I sat there, phone in hand, I realized the irony. A parasite dies without a host. And I was the host. I had just attached the leech, and now, I was going to watch it wither. I looked at the phone screen one last time, my thumb hovering over the block contact button for Tiffany's number. If you are still listening, please help me like this video and comment the number 1 below, so I know that you are amazing, and I understand that you are accompanying me throughout this journey of reclaiming justice. Your support is a huge encouragement, cheering me on. Please comment number 1 so I can recognize you, and now, let's listen as I continue telling my story. I pressed block. Then I blocked Brad. Then I blocked Linda. Then I blocked Robert. I set the phone down on the coffee table. The screen went black. The silence in the room was no longer heavy, it was pregnant with possibility. With the digital execution complete, the adrenaline finally began to drain out of me. It left behind a hollow, aching exhaustion. My body felt heavy, like lead. My hands were shaking, not from anger anymore, but from the crash. I looked around the room. It was a disaster zone. Turkey bones on the rug. Wine stains on the wood. The air still smelled of their cheap perfume and entitlement. It felt tainted. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I found a trash bag and began to clean. It was mechanical, mindless work, but it was necessary. I needed to purge them from my space physically as well as financially. I threw away the half-eaten food. I threw away the cheap decorations they had put up. I threw away the wine glass Tiffany had cracked. I scrubbed the counter where Brad had spilled beer. As I was wiping down the kitchen island, I found something. It was a crumpled piece of paper that had fallen behind the toaster. I smoothed it out. It was a note. In Brad's handwriting. Mom, Dad, welcome to our new home. We're so glad you could make it to celebrate our success. This lodge is just the beginning. Tiffany and I are looking at a beach house in Florida next. My stomach turned. They hadn't just lied about borrowing the house. They had constructed an entire alternate reality where they were the successful ones, and I didn't even exist in this narrative. I was just the invisible bank account. I crumpled the note and threw it into the roaring fire. I watched the paper blacken and curl, the lie turning into ash. When I reached the fireplace, I saw the empty spot on the mantel where my parents' photo belonged. I picked up the silver frame from the table where I had set it earlier. The glass was smeared, but the photo inside was unharmed. My parents looked back at me, young and hopeful. "I'm sorry, Mom," I whispered to the empty room. I couldn't do it anymore. I broke the promise. But she broke me first. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and fast. I sank onto the floor in front of the fire, clutching the picture frame to my chest. I cried. I cried for the sister I used to have, the little girl with the pigtails who used to follow me around. I cried for the relationship I wished we had. I cried for the 10 years of my life I had wasted trying to buy love that was never for sale. It wasn't a sad cry, exactly. It was a release. It was the sound of a dam breaking. After a while, the tears stopped. I felt cleansed. I stood up, poured myself a glass of water, I couldn't stomach wine right now, and picked up my phone again. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't crazy. I needed a reality check. I dialed Sarah. Sarah wasn't just my property manager, she was my best friend and my lawyer. "Kendra?" Sarah's voice was groggy. It was late. "Is everything okay?" "I evicted them," I said, my voice raspy. "I kicked Tiffany and Brad out. Into the blizzard. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, Sarah's voice came back, sharp and awake. Wait. Seriously? You actually did it? You finally stood up to her? I did. And I cancelled the cards. And I sent you an email about the apartment eviction. I want you to start the process tomorrow. Oh my God, Sarah breathed. Kendra, I am so proud of you. I have been waiting for this day for 5 years. I'll have the paperwork ready by 9 a.m. I feel terrible, I admitted. Is that normal? I feel like I kicked a puppy. Tiffany is not a puppy, Sarah said firmly. She is a grown woman who has been financially abusing you. You didn't kick a puppy, you stopped letting a vampire suck your blood. Did they have a place to go? They went to a hotel, I assume. Or back to the city. Robert was driving the sedan. Then they're fine. You didn't kill them. You just forced them to be adults. Listen to me, Kendra. Do not back down. Tomorrow morning, she is going to call you crying. She is going to threaten you. Do not answer. I blocked her, I said. Good girl, Sarah said. Now, go to sleep. Tomorrow, we go to war. But tonight, you've already won the first battle. I hung up. Sarah was right. I hadn't killed them. I had just stopped saving them. I walked over to the window. The storm was still raging, a white curtain erasing the world. Somewhere out there, in a cramped sedan, my sister was probably cursing my name. But in here, for the first time in a decade, the air felt light. The house finally felt like mine. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating a world buried in pristine white snow. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silence so deep it felt holy. I sat with a mug of coffee, watching the light dance on the icicles hanging from the roof. In the quiet of the morning, my mind drifted back to Brad. Last night, he had played the role of the helpless husband, caught between a rock and a hard place. He had looked at me with those puppy dog eyes, pleading for mercy. But as the caffeine cleared my head and the events of the night replayed in my mind, I realized something dark. Brad was just as guilty as Tiffany. Maybe even more so. I thought back to the investments. 3 years ago, Brad had come to me with a foolproof business plan. He wanted to open a high-end craft brewery. He had the charts, the graphs, the projected revenue. He wore a suit. He looked professional. Kendra, he had said, his eyes shining with false sincerity. This is it. This is how I take care of Tiffany the way she deserves. I know you've been carrying us. I want to be the man of the house. I just need a little seed capital. 50,000. I'll pay you back with interest in 18 months. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he wanted to be a provider. I wanted to believe that Tiffany had married a good man. So I wrote the check. 6 months later, the brewery was gone. He said the zoning permits fell through. He said the equipment was faulty. But I saw the new watches. I saw the trip to Cabo on Instagram. I saw the new rims on his car. When I asked about the money, Tiffany had flown into a rage. Why do you care about money so much? You have plenty. You're shaming him for trying. He's depressed, Kendra. How could you be so cruel? So I dropped it. I wrote off $50,000 to keep the peace. I let them gaslight me into thinking I was the villain for asking for my money back. Then there was the car. The white SUV. Last year, Brad had called me, his voice trembling. Kendra, it's my parents. My dad's hip is getting worse. He can't get in and out of their low sedan. We need a bigger car to take them to their appointments. But our credit, well, you know. He played on my sympathy for the elderly. He played on my desire to be the hero. I'll co-sign, I had said. But you make the payments. They made exactly 2 payments. Then the excuses started. Work is slow. Tiffany needed dental work. By the 3rd month, the bank was calling me. I just set up the autopay from my account to save my credit score. But last night Robert was driving the sedan. The low sedan that was supposedly impossible for him to use. He walked just fine. He drove just fine. The whole story about the hip and the appointments was a lie. A fabrication Brad invented to get a luxury car for free. Brad knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't a victim of Tiffany's spending, he was the architect of it. He was the whisperer in her ear. He stroked her ego, validated her victimhood, and pointed her at my bank account like a loaded weapon. He was a man who had decided that marrying a woman with a rich sister was a career path. I remembered a dinner party a few months ago. I had stepped out onto the balcony to get some air. I overheard Brad talking to one of his friends just around the corner. "Yeah, we're thinking about Europe next summer," Brad had said, his voice slurring slightly. "Kendra will cover it. She feels guilty if Tiffany isn't happy. It's too easy, man. You just gotta make Tiffany cry a little, and the checkbook opens up." I had walked away then, pretending I hadn't heard. I was too cowardly to confront him. Too afraid of the scene Tiffany would make. I let him call me a fool behind my back while he drank my scotch. But sitting here now, in the silence of my reclaimed home, that memory didn't make me sad. It made me furious. "It's too easy, man." Those words burned in my brain. He thought I was a fool. An ATM with a pulse. Well, Brad, I thought, taking a sip of coffee. Let's see how easy it is to pay for Europe when your credit card is declined and your car is on a tow truck. Let's see how much you love Tiffany when she brings nothing to the table but debt and drama. I realized then that destroying their comfort wasn't just about punishment. It was about exposing the rot in their marriage. Without my money acting as the glue, Tiffany and Brad would have nothing. They would have to face each other, two lazy, entitled people with no resources and no one to blame but themselves. I smiled. The real show was just beginning. The storm outside had passed, but the storm I had unleashed on their lives was just making landfall. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the towing company. It was time to take back what was mine. The 3 days following Christmas were the quietest of my life. Usually, the silence of the lodge would have made me anxious. In the past, whenever I was here alone, my mind would race with work emails, tenant complaints, or the inevitable crisis text from Tiffany. "Kendra, I need money for rent." "Kendra, Brad crashed the car." "Kendra, I'm lonely." My phone had been a leash, and Tiffany held the handle. But not this time. After I made the call to the towing company, I turned my phone off. Completely off. I threw it in a drawer in the kitchen and didn't look at it. For 72 hours, I existed only for myself. I woke up when the sun hit the master bedroom window, not when an alarm screamed at me. I spent hours just watching the snow fall, marveling at how it blanketed the world in white, hiding the scars of the land. I cooked meals that I wanted to eat, spicy Thai curry, roasted vegetables with balsamic glaze, not the bland meat and potatoes Brad preferred or the expensive sushi Tiffany always demanded I order. I started the process of reclaiming my home. I scrubbed every surface they had touched. It was a ritualistic cleansing. I washed the sheets they had slept in with hot water and bleach. I vacuumed the rugs until the fibers stood up straight again. On the second day, I went into the wine cellar. I did an inventory. They had drunk 4 bottles. Not just any bottles, but the 2012 Cabernets I had been saving for my wedding day, the wedding to David that never happened because of them. Seeing those empty slots in the rack didn't make me sad. It made me resolute. They had consumed my past, but they would not consume my future. I spent the afternoons reading by the fire, wrapped in a blanket that didn't smell like Linda's cheap perfume. I read books on architecture and design, reigniting a passion I had buried under spreadsheets and family obligations. But the most profound moment came on the third evening. I was sitting on the deck, wrapped in a heavy coat, drinking tea and looking at the stars. The storm had cleared, and the sky was a sheet of diamonds. I thought about Tiffany. Not with anger, but with a strange, clinical detachment. I realized that I didn't actually know who my sister was. I knew the version of her that needed me. I knew the victim, the drama queen, the manipulator. But did I know her soul? Did she even have one, or was she just a mirror reflecting whatever she needed to be to get what she wanted? I realized that for 10 years, I hadn't been a sister. I had been a parent. A banker. A safety net. And because I was always there to catch her, she never learned how to fall. She never learned that gravity is real. You're not helping her, you're crippling her. David's words came back to me, clearer than ever. He was right. I had crippled her with kindness. I had suffocated her with support. By cutting her off, I wasn't destroying her. I was giving her the only gift that mattered, the chance to grow up. It would be painful. It would be ugly. She would hate me for it. But it was the only way. On the morning of the fourth day, I packed my bag. I put the silver frame with my parents' photo back on the mantel. I touched my mother's face through the glass. "I'm doing this for us, Mom," I whispered. "I'm doing this so I can live." I walked to the drawer and retrieved my phone. I took a deep breath and turned it on. It vibrated instantly. And it didn't stop. Buzz. 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 It danced across the table like a possessed object. Hundreds of notifications. Missed calls from unknown numbers. Voicemails. Emails. Texts from mutual friends. I didn't open a single one. I simply put the phone in my pocket, locked the heavy oak door of the lodge, and walked to my Range Rover. The air was crisp and cold. The mountain stood silent, a witness to my rebirth. I started the engine and drove down the winding road, leaving the sanctuary behind. I was heading back to the city. Back to the war zone. But this time, I wasn't a peacekeeper. I was a general. The drive back to Denver was a transition between two worlds. As the pristine white mountains gave way to the gray slush of the city highways, I felt my armor locking into place. The Kendra who cried by the fire was gone. The Kendra who ran a multi-million-dollar business was back. My first stop wasn't my apartment. It was the glass-walled office building downtown where Sarah's law firm was located. Sarah was waiting for me in the conference room. She looked impeccable in a navy suit, her eyes sharp and ready. On the table between us sat a stack of documents, crisp and terrifying. "Welcome back from the dead," Sarah said, sliding a coffee across the mahogany table. "You look rested." Which is annoying, considering the hurricane you unleashed while you were offline. "How bad is it?" I asked, taking a sip. "It's messy," Sarah admitted. "Tiffany has been calling the office non-stop. She's threatening to sue you for illegal eviction and emotional distress. She claims she has tenant rights because she's lived there for 3 years. Does she?" I asked, a flicker of worry igniting in my chest. Sarah smiled, a shark-like grin that told me exactly why I paid her a retainer. "Normally, yes. But remember the lease agreement I made you sign with them? The one you thought was too harsh?" I nodded. 3 years ago, when I let them move into the penthouse, Sarah had insisted on a formal lease, even though the rent was nominal. Clause 14b, Sarah tapped a document. Strict prohibition of subletting or unauthorized long-term guests. And Clause 21, any criminal activity on the property or against the landlord nullifies the lease immediately. Criminal activity? I asked. She called the police on you, Kendra. She filed a false report claiming you were an intruder in your own home. That is a crime. And Sarah pulled out a tablet. I did some digging. Remember you said Tiffany mentioned a friend staying at the penthouse? Yes. I pulled the security logs from the building concierge. Tiffany has been running an Airbnb out of your spare bedroom for the last 8 months. She's been charging people $200 a night to stay in your apartment, pocketing the cash, and not telling you. My blood ran cold. She was subletting? While I was paying the mortgage? She made about $15,000 last year, Sarah said. Tax-free. And she still asked you for money for groceries. The rage that I thought I had left in the mountains came rushing back, hotter than before. $15,000. She was running a business out of my charity. Evict her, I said, my voice shaking. Now. Today. Already in motion, Sarah said. The sheriff is serving the notice to quit based on lease violations as we speak. Because of the illegal subletting and the false police report, we don't have to give them 30 days. We're giving them 72 hours to vacate. And the car? The repo order is active. The bank knows where the car is, parked at Brad's parents' house. They're sending a truck today. I leaned back in the chair, feeling the weight of the legal machinery I had set in motion. It felt clinical. It felt just. There's one more thing, Sarah said, her voice softening. Brad called me. Brad? He tried to play the rational husband card. He asked if we could work out a payment plan. He said Tiffany is hysterical and he's just trying to keep the family together. What did you tell him? I told him that his name is on the lease too. And that if he wants to avoid being named in a lawsuit for the unauthorized Airbnb profits, he needs to get his wife out of that apartment by Friday. He knew, I said, realizing it. He knew about the Airbnb. That's where the money for his golf clubs came from. Likely, Sarah agreed. Kendra, you need to be prepared. When the repo truck shows up, and when the sheriff knocks on the door, it's going to get ugly. They are going to lash out. Are you ready for the backlash? I thought about the empty wine bottles. I thought about the note in the trash where they claimed my success as their own. I thought about the text messages Sarah had just showed me, Tiffany calling me a stingy cow to her Airbnb guests. I'm not just ready, Sarah, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. I'm looking forward to it. Let it burn. I left the office with a lighter step. The law was on my side. The facts were on my side. For the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting with emotion. I was fighting with contracts. And in the world of business, contracts always win. I returned to my own home, a modest but elegant townhouse closer to my office, and finally turned my phone's cellular data back on. The explosion was instantaneous. In psychology, there is a term for the people an abuser recruits to attack their victim, flying monkeys, named after the Wicked Witch's henchman in The Wizard of Oz. Tiffany didn't just have monkeys, she had an entire air force. My inbox was flooded with messages from cousins I hadn't seen in years, aunts who lived 3 states away, and mutual friends who had only heard Tiffany's sob story. Kendra, how could you? It's Christmas. I heard you threw a pregnant woman out in the snow. You monster. Tiffany wasn't pregnant, of course. That was a new lie she had spun. Family helps family. You have so much, why are you being so greedy? It was a masterclass in manipulation. Tiffany had painted a picture of a tyrannical, jealous sister who hated her happiness. I sat at my kitchen island, pouring a glass of water, and started the process of digital hygiene. I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself. I simply blocked. Block. 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 Then, my phone rang. It was Aunt Brenda. Brenda was my mother's sister. She had always been critical of me, calling me work-obsessed and cold, while doting on Tiffany's free spirit. I debated ignoring it, but something in me wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the extent of the lie. "Hello, Aunt Brenda," I answered calmly. "Kendra Marie Brooks." Brenda's voice screeched through the speaker. I have never been so ashamed in my life. I just got off the phone with poor Tiffany. She is sobbing. She says you set her up. She says you invited them to the lodge and then called the police on them when they arrived. Is this true? The lie was so bold I almost admired it. "No, Aunt Brenda," I said. "I didn't invite them. They broke in. They stole my wine. Linda was wearing Mom's fur coat and spilling drinks on it." "Oh, stop it," Brenda snapped. "Always with the material things. My wine, my coat, my house. Do you care about anything other than money? Tiffany is family. She said you're evicting them from their apartment too? Where are they supposed to go? They're destitute. They're destitute because they refuse to work," I said. "Tiffany is 32. Brad is 35. Why is it my responsibility to house them?" "Because you can," Brenda shouted. "You have millions. What is an apartment to you? It's a tax write-off. You're just being cruel because you're lonely. That's what this is. You're jealous because Tiffany has a husband and a family and you have nothing." The words hit their mark. Jealous because you have nothing. That was the narrative they pushed. That my success was a consolation prize for being unlovable. I took a deep breath. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. "Brenda," I said, my voice dropped dead calm. "Since you are so concerned about family, and since you think Tiffany's situation is so tragic, I have a solution." "What?" she asked, wary. "I'll send an Uber to pick them up right now. They can come live with you. You have that 3-bedroom house in Ohio. You're retired. You have plenty of time to cook for them and clean up after them. I'm sure you'd love to support them." Silence. Dead silence on the line. "Well," I pressed. "Shall I send them? I'll pay for the plane tickets. One way." I can't," Brenda stammered. "I'm on a fixed income. I don't have the space, my arthritis. So let me get this straight," I cut her off. "You want them to be supported, but you don't want to do it. You want me to do it. You're generous with my money, Brenda, but very stingy with your own. That's not fair." "It's entirely fair. If you aren't willing to house them, don't you dare judge me for stopping. Goodbye, Brenda." I hung up. I stared at the phone. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't from fear. It was the thrill of boundaries. For the first time, I realized that these people didn't love me. They loved what I provided. And if they couldn't respect the provider, they didn't deserve the provision. I blocked Aunt Brenda. Then, I saw a notification pop up from Instagram. It wasn't a message. It was a tag. A video. The thumbnail showed a tow truck. And a screaming woman. I clicked play. The video had been posted by a neighbor of Brad's parents. The caption read, "Drama in the suburbs. Repo Man vs. Karen, #repo, #public freakout, #karma." It already had 5,000 views. I watched, mesmerized, as the scene unfolded on my small screen. The video was shaky, filmed from an upstairs window across the street. In the driveway of Linda and Robert's modest suburban house, a massive flatbed tow truck was backing up toward the white SUV. The SUV, my SUV, was parked haphazardly on the lawn, as if abandoned in a hurry. Then, the front door of the house flew open. Tiffany burst out. She wasn't wearing a coat, just a pair of thin leggings and a sweater, running barefoot into the slush. "Stop! Stop it," she screamed, her voice shrill and distorted by the phone's microphone. She threw herself in front of the truck. "You can't take this. It's my car. My sister paid for it." The tow truck driver, a burly man who had clearly seen it all, stepped out of the cab. He held a clipboard. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. I have a repo order from the bank. Primary leaseholder authorized the pickup." "She can't do that," Tiffany wailed, slapping the hood of the car. "We have rights. My kids need this car." I paused the video. My kids. She still didn't have children. She used imaginary children as a shield even with strangers. The video continued. Brad came out next. He looked hungover, wearing sweatpants. He tried to pull Tiffany back, but she shoved him away. "Do something, Brad," she shrieked. "Don't just stand there. Beat him up. Stop him." Brad, wisely, did not try to beat up the tow truck driver who was twice his size. Instead, he put his hands on his head and paced in circles, looking like a man whose world was collapsing. "Ma'am," the driver said calmly. "If you don't move, I'm calling the cops." At the mention of cops, Tiffany froze. She had already had one run-in with the police this week. She knew she was on thin ice. She stepped back, defeated. But she didn't go quietly. As the driver hooked up the SUV and began to winch it onto the flatbed, Tiffany turned toward the house, toward the camera, though she didn't know it, and unleashed a stream of curses that would make a sailor blush. "She's a witch. She's ruining my life. I hope she rots. It's not fair." Then, the piece de resistance. Linda came out to the porch. She shouted, loud enough for the microphone to pick up, "Tiffany, get inside. The neighbors are watching. You're embarrassing us." "Shut up, you old hag," Tiffany screamed back. "This is your fault. If you hadn't worn that stupid coat, maybe she wouldn't have snapped." The video ended with the SUV driving away, leaving Tiffany standing in the empty driveway, barefoot in the snow, screaming at her mother-in-law. I put the phone down. A laugh bubbled up in my chest. A dark, satisfied laugh. It was humiliating. It was messy. It was public. But more than that, it was confirming. Tiffany blamed Linda. Linda blamed Tiffany. Brad blamed the universe. None of them blamed themselves. They were already turning on each other. The happy family that had invaded my lodge was fracturing under the pressure of reality. Without my money to smooth over the cracks, their dysfunction was spilling out into the street. I felt a pang of second-hand embarrassment, but it was quickly drowned out by relief. That chaos wasn't in my life anymore. It was on a screen. It was someone else's content. I shared the link with Sarah. Her reply came 10 seconds later, "Popcorn time. By the way, the sheriff just confirmed service of the eviction notice at the apartment. They have 48 hours to get their junk out." The hits were keeping coming. But the biggest blow was yet to land. I didn't know it yet, but amidst the rubble of their eviction, a secret was waiting for me. A secret that would justify every single thing I had done. 2 days later, the deadline for the apartment eviction arrived. Sarah advised me not to go, but I had to. I needed to inspect the property for damages before the locks were changed. I brought a security guard with me, just in case. When I arrived at the penthouse, the door was unlocked. The apartment was empty of people, but full of trash. They had left in a hurry. Clothes were scattered on the floor, dishes were piled in the sink, and the smell of stale smoke hung in the air. They had taken the TV. They had taken the microwave, which was built in. They actually ripped it out of the wall. But they had left behind the things that didn't have immediate pawn value. I walked into the guest bedroom, the one Tiffany had been using for her illegal Airbnb operation. The bed was unmade. On the bedside table sat a stack of mail and an old iPad. It was an older model, one I had given Tiffany years ago when I upgraded. The screen was cracked. I picked it up. It was dead. On a hunch, I plugged it into the charger left on the floor. A few minutes later, the Apple logo appeared. It booted up. No passcode. Tiffany was always lazy with security. I opened the Messages app, intending to see if there was evidence of the Airbnb rentals to use in court. I found those threads easily enough. But as I scrolled down, a name caught my eye. David. My ex-fiancé. My heart stopped. Why would Tiffany have a message thread with David? I clicked on it. The messages were dated 2 years ago, right around the time David and I started having problems. Right before he left me. I read. And as I read, the world tilted on its axis. Tiffany, hey David, I shouldn't be telling you this, but I'm worried about Kendra. She's been seeing her ex-boyfriend again. She says she's just confused, but I thought you should know. David, what? Are you sure? Tiffany, I saw his car at her office. She told me she was working late. I just don't want you to get hurt. Please don't tell her I told you, she'll kill me. I gasped. It was a lie. A complete fabrication. I hadn't seen an ex-boyfriend in a decade. I was working late, working to pay for Tiffany's credit card bills. I scrolled further. Tiffany, she told me last night that she feels trapped with you. She says you're boring and she misses the excitement. She's only staying because she feels guilty. David, I can't believe this. I thought we were happy. Tiffany, she's a good actress, David. Look, maybe you should just end it. If you leave her, it'll be easier for her. She's too weak to do it herself. Tears blurred my vision. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped the iPad. She had planted the seeds. She had poisoned him. She knew David was a proud man. She knew that if he thought I was cheating or unhappy, he would walk away to save his dignity. Why? Why would she do this? I found the answer in a text she sent to Brad the day after David moved out. Tiffany, he's gone. Finally. LOL. That was close. If they got married, David would have cut us off. He was already talking about financial boundaries. Now we have Kendra all to ourselves again. Brad, you're a genius, babe. Drinks on me. Or, on Kendra, winky face. I sank onto the dirty floor of the guest room. A guttural scream ripped from my throat. It wasn't just about money. It never was. She had stolen my life. She had stolen the love of my life. She had deliberately sabotaged my happiness, destroyed my future marriage, and broke my heart purely because she viewed my husband as a threat to her bank account. She treated me like livestock. Like a cow to be milked. And she would kill anyone who tried to open the gate. The grief I felt for David was overwhelming. He hadn't left because he didn't love me. He left because he thought I didn't love him. He left because he was manipulated by a sociopath I called sister. I sat there for a long time, staring at the cracked screen. The last remnants of guilt I felt about the eviction, the car, the blizzard, it all evaporated. I wasn't dealing with a messy family member. I was dealing with an enemy. I took screenshots of everything. I emailed them to myself. Then I stood up. You wanted me all to yourself, Tiffany? I said to the empty room, my voice trembling with cold rage. Well, now you have nothing. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what you are. I walked out of the apartment. I told the security guard to change the locks immediately. If they come back, I said, arrest them. I got into my car and sat there for a moment. Then, I did something I should have done 2 years ago. I searched for David's name in my contacts. His number was still there. I didn't call him. Not yet. I wasn't ready. But I knew that part of my revenge, part of my healing, would be telling him the truth. Even if it was too late for us, he deserved to know he wasn't crazy. But first, I had to finish burying the monsters. With the penthouse gone and the car repossessed, Tiffany and Brad were forced into the only refuge left, Brad's parents' house. It was a small, 3-bedroom ranch in the suburbs. Linda and Robert had lived there for 40 years. It was cluttered, smelled of mothballs, and was decidedly not the luxury lifestyle Tiffany was accustomed to. I didn't need a spy to know what was happening. The grapevine, fueled by the neighbors and Brad's loose-lipped cousins, provided me with daily updates. The Mooching Sister saga had become the town's favorite soap opera. Without my money, the dynamic in the Hayes household shifted overnight. Tiffany, once the rich daughter-in-law who brought gifts, purchased with my money, was now just another mouth to feed. I heard about the chore chart. Linda, furious about the public humiliation of the repo incident, had snapped. She told Tiffany that if she wanted to eat, she had to work. I heard Linda makes her scrub the toilets, Sarah told me over lunch, trying to hide her glee. And Tiffany isn't allowed to use the good shampoo. Poetic justice, I murmured. But the real cracks were forming between Tiffany and Brad. When they had my money, their marriage was easy. They bonded over shopping trips, vacations, and judging other people. They were united in their parasitism. Now, stripped of resources, they were turning on each other. Brad was under pressure from his father, Robert. Robert had finally grown a spine. He told Brad he had 30 days to find a job or get out. Real jobs. Not consulting gigs or startups. Brad, naturally, blamed Tiffany. I overheard them screaming in the driveway, a neighbor posted on Facebook. The guy was yelling, "You spent it all. You told me she would never cut us off." And the girl was screaming, "You're a loser. You promised to take care of me." Tiffany called me. It was a week after the eviction. She used a burner phone. "Hello?" I answered, not recognizing the number. "Kendra?" Her voice was small, broken. "Please don't hang up." "What do you want, Tiffany?" "I'm in hell," she sobbed. "Linda is a monster. She calls me useless. She makes me wake up at 6 a.m. The house smells like cabbage. I can't live like this." "You have a degree," I said indifferently. "Get a job. Rent your own place." "I can't," she wailed. "I'm depressed. I have trauma from the eviction. How can you be so cold? I'm your sister." "You're not my sister," I said, my hand tightening on the phone. I read the texts, Tiffany. Silence on the line. "What texts?" "The texts to David. On the old iPad. I know what you did. I know you lied to him to break us up because you were afraid he would stop the gravy train." I could hear her breath hitching. She didn't deny it. She didn't gasp in shock. She switched tactics instantly. "I did it for you," she screamed. "He wasn't right for you. He would have taken you away from me. We're sisters. We're supposed to be together. You did it for the money," I said. "And now, you have neither. Don't call me again." I hung up. That conversation confirmed everything. She wasn't sorry. She was just sorry she got caught. The pressure cooker at Linda's house was about to explode. And when it did, Tiffany wouldn't just lose her home, she would lose her last enabler. A week later, Tiffany played her final, desperate card. I was in the middle of a quarterly meeting with my entire staff, about 20 realtors and admin staff, in the glass-walled conference room of my agency. We were discussing sales targets for Q1. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the lobby. I heard shouting. "I need to see her. She's my sister. You can't stop me." It was Tiffany. She had bypassed the receptionist and was storming down the hallway. She looked different. Her hair, usually perfectly blown out, was frizzy and tied back in a messy bun. She was wearing old jeans and a coat that looked too big for her. The veneer of wealth was gone. She burst into the conference room. My staff gasped. "Tiffany," I said, staying seated at the head of the table. "You're trespassing. Again." "I want my money," she screamed, slamming her hands on the glass table. "I want Mom and Dad's inheritance. You stole it. You kept it all for yourself and built this empire, while I'm living in a basement." My staff looked at me, eyes wide. This was the scene she wanted. Public humiliation. She thought if she made a scene, I would write a check to make her go away. I stood up slowly. "Let's be clear," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the room. "Mom and Dad left us $50,000 each. That was the life insurance. There was no fortune. Liar," she shrieked. "You have millions." "I made millions," I corrected. "I took my $50,000 and invested it in a duplex. You took your $50,000 and spent it on a trip to Europe and a wardrobe." I walked over to the whiteboard. I picked up a marker. "Let's do some math, Tiffany. Since you want to talk about inheritance." I wrote, $50,000 initial inheritance. "That was gone in 2014, I said. Then I wrote, rent, 10 years $240,000. Cars, 2 leases $80,000. Credit cards, paid by me $150,000. Loans for Brad, $60,000. I circled the total, $530,000. "I have given you over $500,000 in the last decade," I said, pointing at the board. "That is 10 times the inheritance. You didn't get cheated, Tiffany. You got overpaid. And you spent it all." The room was silent. My staff looked from the board to Tiffany. The sympathy in the room evaporated instantly. Tiffany stared at the numbers. Her face turned bright red. Her narrative, the poor victimized sister, was being dismantled with math. You're counting rent?" she stammered. "Family doesn't charge rent." "Landlords do," I said. "And I was your landlord. And your banker. And your mother. But now, I'm just Kendra." I pressed the intercom button on the table. "Security, please remove the intruder from conference room B." "You can't do this," Tiffany screamed as 2 security guards appeared at the door. "I'll sue you. I'll tell everyone." "Everyone already knows," I said. "Goodbye, Tiffany." She was dragged out, kicking and screaming obscenities. As she passed the glass wall, she locked eyes with me. There was no love there. Just the pure, unadulterated rage of a parasite that had been ripped from the host. When the door closed, I turned back to my staff. My hands were steady. "Apologies for the interruption," I said. "Now, regarding the Q1 projections." Inside, I was shaking. But outside, I was unbreakable. That public confrontation broke the last chain. She had tried to shame me, and instead, she had shamed herself. The fallout from the office incident was immediate. Brad, hearing about Tiffany's public meltdown and realizing there was absolutely no chance of me opening the checkbook again, finally made his move. He filed for divorce. I heard about it from Sarah, who monitored court filings for me. Irreconcilable differences, Sarah read over the phone. And get this, he's asking for no alimony because neither of them has any income. He's cutting her loose. Brad was a rat jumping from a sinking ship. He realized Tiffany was a liability. Without my money, she was just a demanding, high-maintenance woman with no job skills and a bad temper. Brad figured he had a better chance of mooching off his parents if he was single. Tiffany was served the papers at Linda's house. According to the neighbor's grapevine, Linda actually cheered. Linda kicked Tiffany out the same day. "This is my son's house," Linda apparently told her. "You're not his wife anymore. Get out." Tiffany ended up in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. She had maxed out the one credit card she managed to get in her own name within a week. She got a job. She had to. She started working as a hostess at a chain restaurant, the kind of place she used to mock. I drove by once, weeks later. I saw her through the window, wiping down menus, looking exhausted and miserable. She wasn't wearing designer clothes. She was wearing a polyester uniform. I felt a pang of pity, but I squashed it. This was her life. This was the life she had earned. She was finally learning the value of $1. The divorce was messy. They fought over debt, not assets. They fought over who was responsible for the credit card bills I had stopped paying. In the end, Tiffany was left with nothing but her clothes and a mountain of debt. I didn't intervene. I didn't offer a lawyer. I didn't send money. I let her fall. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But every time I wavered, I looked at the screenshot of the text message to David. "She's too weak to do it herself." I wasn't weak anymore. 6 months passed. Spring arrived in the Rockies. The snow melted, revealing wildflowers. I spent every weekend at the lodge. I renovated it again, not because it needed it, but because I wanted to erase every trace of them. I repainted the living room a warm sage green. I replaced the furniture. I bought new wine glasses. I started dating again. I met Mark at a gallery opening. He was an architect. He was 40, kind, and self-sufficient. On our third date, I told him about Tiffany. I laid it all out, the money, the eviction, the betrayal with David. I waited for him to run. To say it was too much drama. Instead, he reached across the table and took my hand. "You're incredibly strong," he said. "Most people would have broken. You built a fortress." Mark didn't need my money. He insisted on splitting checks. He bought me flowers. It was a revelation. I realized that this was what a partnership was supposed to be. I also reconnected with David. I called him. We met for coffee. I showed him the screenshots from the iPad. He stared at them for a long time. Then he looked at me, his eyes filled with regret. "I should have trusted you," he said. I let her get in my head. "I'm so sorry." We didn't get back together, too much time had passed, and too much pain, but we forgave each other. He told me he was proud of me for finally cutting the cord. It was the closure I needed. My business thrived. Free from the constant drain of Tiffany's emergencies, I had more focus, more capital, and more energy. I opened a second branch. I was happy. Truly, deeply happy. The silence in my life wasn't loneliness anymore, it was peace. One evening in May, as I was sitting on the porch of the lodge watching the sunset with Mark, my phone rang. It was a blocked number. I knew who it was. I hadn't heard her voice in 6 months. I debated not answering. But I felt strong. I felt ready. "Hello? Kendra?" The voice was thin, raspy. It sounded older. "Hello, Tiffany. I heard you're seeing someone, she said. I am. That's nice. A pause. I'm working at a diner now. Double shifts. That's good, Tiffany. Honest work is good. It's hard, she whispered. My feet hurt. I can't pay my electric bill this month. Kendra, please. Just a loan. I'll pay you back. I swear. I've learned my lesson. It was the moment of truth. The hook was baited. The old Kendra would have heard the pain in her voice and caved. The old Kendra would have sent $500 just to make the guilt stop. But I looked at Mark, who was smiling at me over his book. I looked at the mountains. I looked at the life I had built. I can't do that, Tiffany, I said gentle. Why? She cracked. You have so much. Just a little bit. Because I love you, I said. And I meant it. And because I love you, I won't help you stay a child. You have hands. You have a brain. You can figure out the electric bill. I believe in you. I hate you, she screamed, the mask slipping one last time. You're selfish. You want me to suffer. I want you to survive, I said. On your own. If you don't help me, I don't know what I'll do. You'll figure it out, I said. Just like I did. Don't you ever call me again, she yelled. I won't, I said. Take care of yourself, Tiffany. I hung up. I blocked the number. I sat there for a moment, listening to the wind in the trees. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but it was the last one. Mark reached over and squeezed my hand. You okay? Yeah, I said, taking a deep breath of the clean mountain air. I'm okay. I'm finally free. I realized then that the parasite hadn't just been taking my money. She had been taking my confidence. She had made me believe I needed to be needed in order to be loved. But I didn't. I was worthy of love just for being me. I picked up my wine glass, a new one, filled with a wine I had bought for myself, and toasted the sunset. There are no more parasites in my life. The lodge is quiet. The bank account is safe. And my heart is full. From now on, I will fully embrace the freedom I have earned. The quiet, the beauty, and the life that is finally, completely, mine. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to relive, but I hope it helps someone out there who is carrying a burden they need to put down. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, would you have evicted them in the blizzard? I read every comment. Stay strong and protect your peace. And so, this story reminds us of one profound truth: self-worth is not defined by how much we give to others, but by how much we respect ourselves in the process. Kendra's journey is a powerful example of resilience and the courage it takes to reclaim one's life from those who exploit kindness. It teaches us that setting boundaries isn't an act of selfishness, it's an act of self-preservation. True love, whether in family or relationships, cannot exist without mutual respect and accountability. This story also sheds light on the importance of facing adversity with strength and clarity. Life will test us, often through the people closest to us, but it's in these moments that we discover our inner power. Kendra's decision to stand firm wasn't just about protecting her peace, it was about rediscovering her identity and choosing a future free from manipulation. Her story inspires us to prioritize our own growth, even when it means letting go of toxic ties. Now, it's your turn to reflect. What does this story teach you about boundaries, self-respect, or forgiveness? Share your thoughts below, or simply comment good if this lesson resonated with you. Let's continue learning and growing together.